All right, we're back, and it's COMP 2007. It's week 6, lesson 6, part 3, and we're going to talk about the entity framework really quickly. Now again, a lot of this stuff comes out of our book, ASP.NET 4.5.1. But let's talk about this entity framework and what the hell is it anyway, right? Typically, when we do stuff with database, we use ADO.NET, and that's kind of the old way of doing stuff. That's the old database access, and it's kind of a low-level access to doing database, any kind of thing with database, any kind of data access, right? So more often than not, what we do as developers is we use SQL query strings, right? That's inside of by using ADO.NET in order for us to access our databases. And that's cool and everything else, but imagine if this is where they came up with this. We have this other model, this object relational mapper, that allows us to use one language, C#, to do all of our data operations. And that's really what we're calling Entity Framework these days. Now, you don't have to use Entity Framework just for the web. You can use it for other applications as well, right? But it's Microsoft's, I would say, newer framework for data access. So we're going to be talking about that. We're not really going to be covering ADO.NET at all in this course because, again, it's out of scope as it's really not a C# course. This should have been covered for you guys in C#. You guys should have had that a little bit. If you did COMP2004, which was Rapid Application Development, there should have been a bit of ADO.NET covered there as well. Okay. So again, why Entity Framework? Why not something like ADO.NET? Again, we talked about this. We can have all the data access logic that we want. We're writing it at a higher level as opposed to lower level commands, like the select queries and all that kind of stuff we'd be writing. We can do everything in C#, which is the advantage. You use one language to manage data as well as your validation and all your scripts and everything else you do. It's one language. And actually, that's the way we're going nowadays on the web. Think about our kind of new mode of operation these days, right? Actually, we used to call it FMO, future mode of operation. The way we used to function is by taking this emerging technology and including it in our workflows, right? If you weren't doing ASP.NET, you'd probably be doing Node, right? And Node does the same thing. We want to try and use one language, in the case of Node, JavaScript, to manage the web in its entirety, right? Other than markup, which is HTML, and CSS, which is your styling, right? And in this particular case, Microsoft's answer to that is the Entity Framework on the back end, C# to manage it all, right? So we're still using one language as opposed to using multiple languages to manage our data model like we normally would be doing with ADO.NET. This is kind of a picture of what it looks like. So this is your application. You still have ADO.NET in there, but it's a lower level access, almost like we're kind of abstracting one level higher than ADO.NET. We're still accessing, we're going to go through ADO.NET to access all of our data, but we're doing it from a model perspective as opposed to a low level command perspective. That's all that's happening. Okay, there's different styles of creating our database or creating our connections, our models with Entity Framework. And when I say there's different approaches to it, so there's the database first approach. And again, this is what we've done. And this is what we're going to do in this course. Okay, we're going to use the database first approach primarily. And what we do is create the database first, and then from there, we abstract the model, right, back into our code, right? So we don't do it the other way. We don't do our code first, our C# code, and abstract back out to the database. You could do it that way too, right? And there's 3 ways of doing it, but this is the way that we're going to be doing it in this course. So again, you're going to use this entity data model approach by creating your database and abstracting into your project. 2 other ways of doing it, and these are the only things I have on my slide, is the code first approach, where you create your class, right? And then from there, you abstract out, and it automatically creates a database and the whole structure for the database the other way. Now, you might say this might be a little bit more natural for you. Hey, I can do my class. I have no database yet, and as soon as I do my first read-write operation, my database is created. That's kind of cool too, right? For some, it's not as natural, especially if you've been doing database stuff for a long time. This approach is something that you might not feel comfortable with. I'm okay with this. A little bit more complicated, and there's lots of good, cool examples online on how to do this code-first approach. And then we get to the model-first approach, which is even more abstract, right? You do your modeling first, you create your model, it creates the code for you and the database, right? So from a model perspective, right? So you do your all your modeling, think about all your business rules, create your the kind of the way the database should look, create all the connections for the database and all that stuff, and then C# will create everything else for you, right? Very, very cool. So again, there's 3 different approaches. I don't think there's any one approach that's best all around. There's different reasons for using different approaches at different times. That's my last slide for this one. Again, when we use the database-first approach, the advantage is we want to use this when we're working with legacy databases. So if we're going to say we have an existing database, which, let's be honest, by far, this is the most common scenario, right? There's already a database in place, and I want to take this database and migrate it, and I want to access it using the entity framework, right? So this is why we're going to show you this one. Because if I was to go to all the other different types, we're not going to cover everything in this short 14 weeks. There's just no way, right? Again, the design is being done by an admin team, usually somewhere else, or they're keeping track of it. They worry about the database. We worry about accessing the database. And I think this is where I'd like you to be in that space right now, from that perspective. Because from an enterprise computing perspective, there's no way that you guys are going to be handling it all. You might even have very little to do with the database at all, right? Because let's face it, it's just someone else's job, typically, in an enterprise level. And that's really all I want to really talk about when it comes to this. When it comes to your exam, right? All I want you to know for your exam, if we do ask you questions about entity framework, is the 3 approaches, right? Just know the names. If you can know, database first approach, the code first approach, or the model first approach, that's all you really need to know. Yeah.
So for tests, are we gonna have multiple choice or short answers?
There might be a bit of no short answers. I don't do. We don't have time for that. So if I want to get you guys to do any kind of project-based stuff at all, we just don't have time. Short answers also can lead to all kinds of problems. So I want to keep it simple for you guys. Again, it's not supposed to kill you, right? No test is supposed to be out of whack or something that we haven't seen. If I haven't talked about it, you haven't seen it in the videos, we haven't covered it, it's not going to be in the test. Okay? Yeah.
Is all the content of the PowerPoints going to be tested on theoretical content, let's say?
Yes.
For example, you showed us this one.
Yes.
This one has
if I've talked about, that's all it's going to be on. So I'm not going to talk too much more about entity framework. If all I'm covering this for this week and the test is next week, that's the most. I don't want you, remember, traditionally we don't want to cover too much on the test that we do this week, right? Only a little bit. Okay. So that's really it from a database first perspective. Again, all the PowerPoints that I have and anything else that I don't have, I'll put up online for you very shortly. So before the test next week, you'll have everything. Okay, let's get out of this. So in that way, if we were going to do this, if I have my database already, I want to link it. I want to be able to see it somehow or have access to it, right, in our, from a web perspective. How do I do that, right? Okay, so number 1, I'm going to create a new project. So let's go File, New, Project. And again, I'm going to create a new blank project, so ASP.NET Web Application. We're going to call this COMP2007, right? And again, it's lesson 6, part 3, I think, at this stage. And if you notice, I'm already logged in and all that kind of good stuff. I do not have Application Insights to Project on, and I don't recommend you do that in general for this course. I am creating a new Git repository and a directory for my solution. Although you may see some examples of this not being done, only because some people like to have the solution and their project all in one folder. Let's press OK. Now, again, I could do a couple things. If I click one of these are scaffolds that I could use, right? I don't want to use any of these scaffolds. So I want to click empty, but I do want to have some core references for web forms here. In this particular example, we're going to do. So I'm going to click web forms down here. I'm not going to host this in the cloud directly. I'm going to do this later on. I'm going to use Jackie's method by using my GitHub to kind of push that across, right? Because some people have issues doing it the other way around, right? And I'm going to press OK. I'm going to call it Jackie's method from now on, like for the rest of the course. So Jackie, you're famous, right? Press OK. And when we go back in here, I have my Solution Explorer window, and if you notice, there's a couple of things in here. One of them is I have this models folder that's automatically been created and this app data folder. I also have a global ASAX folder as well as a web config folder, right? Okay, cool. I need some kind of thing to house my view, right? And so I'm going to right click on this COMP2007 thing, and I'm going to go add new item, right? Or I can go to HTML page, which is what I really want. If I actually, let me go back. If I had HTML page, that's bad. I want to add new web form, add web form. If you add an HTML page, just kill it. Index, I'll make it an index page. This is the one it'll be. I'm not going to use a master page right now, just for this example, so we understand how this all works, and we'll come back to it later and do more work with this over the next little while. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We've got our auto event wire up is true, which is what we want. We have a code behind file, which is ASP.xcs file, and we have an empty form. Okay, well in here, I want to drag and drop our new controls so we can access the database. Okay, there are different approaches to doing this, and I'm going to do this a couple of different ways so that you see it in different approaches. Make sure that I have everything organized for you guys, because there's totally different ways of doing this. I don't want to confuse the crap out of you guys. Okay. First approach. I go into my, unpin this one, right? And if you notice, I've got different things here. I'm missing one of my views. I want to get my toolbox back. So I've got my toolbox. I want to pin that in, right? And I want to scroll down until I see data, right? I want to kind of minimize this one. Okay, so I've got a bunch of different objects here. Now, you might be familiar with this if you've done rapid application development, COMP2004, right? Which is this one right here, this grid view, right? We've done a grid view before, right? In COMP2004, it's very similar here. Let's drag and drop this grid view between these two divs. Okay. As soon as I do this grid view thing, if I go to design, the design side, what do I get? I get this. Okay, if I run this right now, there's no connection. I have no connection to my database. I have nothing in this particular instance, right? I want to be able to connect this data grid view to my database. Without code first, let's make the connection just with the, on this visual design piece right here. So I'm going to click this smart tag right here, smart arrow, and it's going to take us across. And if you notice, there's a choose data source option, right? I could choose this, and if you notice, there's no new. I need a new data source if I was going to go there. Now this is good and bad. Let's do this. I'm going to do this 3 different ways. You're going to see these tables come across 3 different ways, and you guys tell me which is the best way. Here's the first way. So new data source. Okay, cool. It's going to bring up the data source. You'd be forgiven to think that entity would be the right choice. That's not true. Let's make it database, SQL, right? If you notice our database source down here, right? Here's one thing we have, our database source. If I went to this way, by the way, without using the entity framework, there's no entity framework right now. There's just me connecting and making a database source, all right? If you notice right here, SQL data source, right, is what it's called right here. I'll leave that like as is and press OK. Now, if you notice, there's a connection string, right? Well, there's no connection string. I got to click New Connection, right? And this is where it's going to take me in to my SQL Server section. Now, we already have in our SQL Explorer or Server Explorer, we should have different names. If I kind of click down here, as an example, I should be able to access all my different names, right? Now, one that'll come up for sure, as you're going to see in a second, right, is VM, my name of my Windows machine, right? Because that's my local DB. If you get this is your local database. I don't want this. I need my connection string, right? So I'm going to go SQL Server authentication, right? And in here, I have to put in the name of my server somehow, right? So again, going back, if I just cancel my connection string for a second, let's just cancel it all. Cancel it all, baby. If I go back over here, and if you notice, I've got this it already tried to put it in. This SQL data source tried to do this already for us. Now there isn't anything like that, but on the left hand where we see our SQL, and if I want to get my SQL connection, here's my CSS properties and my SQL server. There it is right here. This is really the connection right here. I already have a connection string, right? This is the one right here. This is actually the connection string that connects to my server. You'd be forgiven to think, right, that I could try drag and drop this thing. Let's try dragging and dropping this thing onto my view. Can't do it, right? There's no way I can connect my view to the data source so easily, right? But I do have a connection string. If I right click, right, and I go to properties as an example, it's going to show you my data source. This is my data source right here, right? So I could copy all this stuff in here, but guess what? It also gives me my username and password. So I got to be very careful if I wanted to do it this way, right? I could copy the data source, the whole data source across. I think I've covered everything here. And then I could go here to my data source. And by the way, let me just kill this. I'll cut this data source back out. Go back here. I can choose a new data source instead of the one that's there for me. I can say not new data source, right? I could specify an ID. I could choose this and go OK, right? I don't have a connection string here. I have to do a new connection. And then the server name is what I need, which is this one right here, CI, whatever. I'm going to use SQL Server Authentication, right? Let's start typing CI7, oh my God, 02 tngzuh.database.windows.net. And let's see if that's correct. If I've done it correctly, I'm going to put my username in there. And I'm going to do my password, right? Don't worry, we're going to get back to this in a second for those of you guys who can't do this, right? You might get an option, because I've done this before, you might get an option to choose different things. Microsoft SQL Server is the one I've chosen, the SQL client. If I click change here, you'll get back to where you guys are at in a second. I'll do that in a second. Okay, select or enter a database name. If I choose down here, it's going to load my databases, and you see I do get COMP2007 because I typed in the name. Right? That's good. That means it accepted my server name as a connection. Now I typed it out. You can certainly copy and paste, right? And I'm going to press OK. Okay, I'm going to wait for my server string to come up. There it is. There's my database. And look at my connection string. It's got my fully qualified connection string with my username and password. This is dangerous, right? I'm showing you this right now because that's how it is. Next, it says, do I want to save this connection in the application configuration file, right? So it's called COMP2007 connection string. It'll be the name of your database and then connection string. Let's say yes for now and press next. And now I have to choose which one I want. Take a look. I can access courses or students. So if that thing that I made, right, as an example, wasn't descriptive enough, if I go back previous, for example, COMP2007 connection string, maybe I want to put in so that it's, courses. Courses connection. I can make it whatever I want. It's got to be, it should be contextual at some point, right? Next. Now I want to choose courses. This is correct. And everything. If you choose this one, that's everything, right? And look, this is the actual SQL statement. Select from, star from courses, right? And then I'm going to press next. And finish. So I'm going to create this connection string here. And if you notice, automatically it has my ID, my department code, my course code, my description. All that stuff comes out. Right now, if you notice, if I click on auto format, right, it auto formats everything for me. I can choose different themes. This is all based on the stuff that I've kind of got in. And we're not using the entity framework here at all. All I've done is pulled in a data grid view from one side to the other. Let's take a look at the code that is generated, though, because I think it's really important for us to know this. So let's run this example, right? And I get a simple connection. This. So we see we're having persistent data. We're accessing the web and the database that's online right here. You guys all get this with me? Anyone not get it? Okay, we should all be able to get this. If I right click and I go view source, right, this is the good thing. If you notice, I get a table, right? And I get hard-coded values because this is what's happening. It's going and fetching the values from the server and throwing them into the table. This is really good, and it makes it kind of a permanent, data that I can copy and paste. Let's take a look at the code behind file and see what's happened. If we've done anything with the code at all, is there any code that we put in? I'm going to stop debugging here, and I'm going to go into Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go into my index.html here. Let's pull this index file up. Or I have it up. Sorry, I go into the source, and look what it's done. It's actually, I'm just going to hide these things for a second. It's actually put in all this data. Here's my data grid view. Added in this columns thing with these bound fields, and it gave them the ID, the department code, the course code, took this right from courses because this is our course connection. So everything that was in the database, it took it and transposed it. It made it its own kind of their own columns. It also did some styling, if you notice, because I chose that font, that theme that I could do right away, and a little bit of styling. This definitely is not compliant with what I want to do with Bootstrap. I'd probably want to use some Bootstrap styling here instead. Yes?
Mine did the styling instead of recent.
Probably because you did what I do, right?
Makes sense.
You probably missed something that I did. Okay, selected row style, again, is back. The back color is true, and so on. So that's what all it did. But the bad thing is this. It gives you your connection string right here, and if you notice, it's this old style ado.net select command. So this is my select command. I'm using this ado.net style of creating our connection and everything else. Cool, but not what we want, right? Okay, let's just get out of here and go back and pull up our Server Explorer for a second again. I want to kind of pin that up. And you know what? I want to pin up my Solution Explorer for now. And instead of doing it this way, let's use Entity Framework, right, for our solution. By the way, if I looked at the code behind file here, do you see any code? The answer is absolutely not. There's no code whatsoever. There's no control we have of our. It's kind of automatically formatted and pushed out, which is okay if you wanted to do a quick view. If you want to do a quick details view, that would be the way to do it. Drag and drop, connect to your data source, and you're good to go, right? But if we want more control for our view, if you want to do some, we've just done a read, right? If we want to do the full CRUD operations, we need additional control. We do that with our code behind file. All right, so let's do the next piece. I'm going to right-click on COMP2007, and I'm going to go to Add, and this time I'm going to go to Add New Item. It'll pull up this, and instead of adding something on the web, we want to add something on the data side. And if you notice the first one that's up here, ado.net Entity Data Model, right? We can call this whatever we want. Right now it's called Model 1, right? We can always call this our COMP 2007 model. That's really what it is, right? And we're going to click Add. Okay, then it's going to take us to this screen here, and it's going to show us different options. So remember the options we talked about in Entity Framework? What are the three ones? Database first, code first, and model first, right? They're right here. Database first, there's model first, there's the code first. And there's also, empty, code first here, empty code. And so you can actually add your own code in there first. Again, if you notice, this is the one that's defaulted. Why? The first one, because it's the most common. Click Next. And if you notice right away, it says, hey, look, I've got a connection that I've already created called COMP2007, right? Course connection strings, right? This is okay, right? I could specify this, or I could choose a new connection. Let's make a new connection for students this time, right? Or if we could do that, if we click new connection. Actually, let's stick with what we've got because I want to keep the same. Well, let's click yes to include the sensitive data in our connection string. Let's do that one, right? Typically, we'd say no, right? But I want to see this. This is what our connection string looks like right now. And if you notice down here, it says COMP2007 entities, right? You know what? I don't want to have COMP2007 entities, right? I want to be able to remember what my framework is called later on with when I code it. So I'm going to put COMP2007 EF, right? Just to keep it simple. I like the COMP2007 because that's the name of my project and my database. And that's what it should probably be around. The context should be around this. Click next. All right. Now, which version of Entity Framework do you want to use? It's obviously Framework 6. This is the latest one, right? And then click next. You got to wait now. Okay, good. Now, when it comes up to this, it shows us the different tables, right? And if you notice, I can choose all the tables for my connection, right? Still going to also zero in on courses. But if I click this, it kind of includes everything in my connection string, which is kind of what I want. I don't have any views or stored procedures and functions in my database right now, so I don't have to include those, right? And if you notice, it's going to go into this namespace, COMP2007 model. I'm going to click Finish. If all goes well, and I did things properly, and so did you, right? Then we're going to get a couple things happening. The first thing is this. NuGet Package Manager is going to go out to the NuGet.org and grab the entity framework and include it as a reference in our project automatically, right? So we don't have to do that by hand, right? That's what it's doing. So if you notice NuGet on the bottom, there's our output window. It's going out there and grabbing it. That's number one. Second thing is it's getting this model. Take a look at the model that's been created here for us. Here's course, and there's a problem with course because of the E on the end. We have to change this over here in a second. Here's our references, and if you notice, the entity framework has been included as a reference inside of our project now. Let's just minimize this for a second. It also created this EDMX file, which is what we're looking at right here. This is this diagram for our models, and there is no relation between courses right now and students, right? We haven't made a relation, so there is no connection that you're going to see here. Otherwise, you would see a connection between the two, right? Again, this is what the model first approach would look like if you're going to use model first development. If you're on the bottom here, you can see the mapping details and how they map and what the model looks like. What we want to do right away is change where it says course, C-O-U-R-S, right? I want to change this so that rename this thing so it's C-O-U-R-S-E. That's just the way it is because it sometimes does that for something like course. Now, if we do it here, you'd think that, well, our model's going to be messed up, but actually if you go down here, it automatically will update. If you save this thing right here, if I save it, take a look over here, it actually saves it down here automatically. So our course CS file, there's a couple of C# files. One is course CS. If I look at it, this is the auto-generated course CS file that gives us our class, our model, right? Here's our model right here. Here's the code. So if you're going to do the code first approach, you do this. You create a couple classes. Your course class, and you create your student class. Here's my student class, right? So instead of it being auto-generated like this, you would generate it this way. And then you would generate the model and the database from the code, right? Again, this is great if you're doing a greenfield project and you're making a new table or something like that. Fantastic. Right? Or if you're adding something to an existing database, you might want to use the code first approach, right? But if you already have an existing database, you want to use the database first approach. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the back end, right? We have a couple of these extra files, and they're all inside this EDMX kind of file that's right here. It's almost like a folder of stuff. Okay, cool. Well, this is good, right? Well, this is where we can add our own custom grid view, right? Now, there's a couple of things we can do automatically. Let's do this auto-magically, like we like to say, right? So here's our index.aspx, the CS view. I want to go and look at the, on the modeling side, I want to add another one of these things. Let me just kind of open this up so you can see what I'm talking about. So instead of, it's going to still be in the same form, but I'm going to create a space. Let's add a space, I'm going to go and if I go and slash, right, MBSP, non-breaking space, right, and then I'm going to get another div tag, and inside my div tag, I want to add in by hand this time, right, or I can drag and drop my ASPX grid view. Let's try this out by typing it in. So if I type in ASP and I say grid view and I press tab, it kind of creates all that stuff for me, right? Now the only thing I do need is I do need an ID, and right now this is bad, but my initial grid view has got an ID of grid view, right? Which makes no sense. If I'm going to get a grid view for my courses, this should be kind of like, you know, grid view, you know, courses, right? And this should be the same, grid view courses, right? But maybe grid view courses number 1. So I'm going to kind of copy this thing and go down to grid view, put that in there, right? Grid view courses. But it's got, instead of having the same name, I'll make it grid view courses number 1. This is the second way of doing it. And press save. If I was to run this thing right now, was it going to do anything different? No way, Jose, right? Why? Because I haven't done anything to connect my data to my grid view right now. It's just doing the first one that I did already, right? Let's try this out. Let's use this file here, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to type in our code a little differently. No problem. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm going to stop debugging. That's the first thing I need to do, right? And let's use this entity framework stuff that we haven't seen before. So I'm going to go into protected. I'm going to create a new method, right, called get courses, right? That's the one I want to use, right? Get courses. And this is in the code behind file, right? I mean, what we want to do is we want to populate you know, a course instance, you know, again, example with a course ID and from the URL, right, that we're going to get. Okay, so let's do that. So that's the first thing we need to do, right? But in order for us to do this, we're going to use something strange, which you probably haven't seen before. We're going to use a using statement. Does anyone know when I go using like this, what we're actually doing when I say using? You guys may have not seen this type of format before. Anybody? This is very interesting. There's two ways of using a using statement. One is this, which includes our different libraries inside of our C# code. The other way is actually this. And what I'm doing here is a couple things. I'm missing a couple things, first of all. I can't do a using statement without, you know, kind of a code. This is our code block that's empty, but we need this. And what's inside of our using statement has to be something that we're going to be accessing. So we know I want to use COMP2007 entity framework is what I want to access. But there's a problem. Even though it's inside of my COMP2007 namespace, right, lesson 6 part 3, I may not have access to it because I don't have a reference to that at all. So if you try typing in something like this, COMP2007 entity framework, like this, you may or may not have access to it. In my case, because I've created a connection string, I have access to it. If you don't, right, and if you get this error, an error that comes up, you can press Control and period, which will pull up a selection of options to add this in into your, so that's part of our framework. Okay, so I want to say this, COMP2007 EF, and I want to make it, I want to call it database, right, which is equal to a new COMP2000 EF database, right? That's what I want to make it. That's the first thing I want to do. So I want to kind of create this database name. So anything in this using statement is going to say, and by the way, using statements are great because using statements allow us to create and clean up code after it's done accessing the database. So we access the database, all of our our housekeeping and all that kind of stuff is taken care of by the using statement. We access the database, and it creates our connection, and then it closes things off and eradicates any kind of variables we create within this statement. So the scope is very, very acute. All right, so we want to create a kind of a course, a reference to our course, right? So the first thing we're going to say is we're going to say course, right? Here's our course. We have our course database, and the reason why we have this comes up is because, again, if you remember from our Solution Explorer, if I go back in here, right, and I'm going to pin this on, inside of this EDMX folder, right, you notice that we have this course class. So all I'm doing is I'm accessing the course class, and now I'm creating an object of the course class. Okay, let's try this out. So course, and I'm going to say, we'll call it C, right, as an example, is equal to, and this is where it gets funky, right? So follow me what I'm going to do here. From, right, here's our statement from. This looks very like what we saw before, right? I want to make sure that I get this correct because I don't want to mess up for you guys, right? But what I want to access, right, is I want to access our courses from our students, right? That's what I want to do. So from what we called it, C, right, in db.courses, right? So course C, right, which is this, and by the way, one thing I need to do is use this var, right? And you're going to say, well, Tom, why are you using var? Isn't that something we use in JavaScript? It's called a generic, right? And you're going to see some of this stuff. So for var course C, right, or var course students, make sure that this is all correct here. And by the way, remembering this stuff is not easy. So if I ever get you to remember it, sue me, because it's not going to happen anytime soon. Let's try this again. So if I go course, right, see how course is not there anymore, right? What I want to say, right, is I want to do this with something like this. I want to say courses. Let's try to type this in, which is equal to from. I was right. Listen, from C in DB students or courses. Sorry. Right. So from this, I'm going to select everything. And I'm saying from C because C is a course. I could actually, to make this so that it's more transparent what this thing is, I could say course. For every course in courses, let's say as an example, for every course in courses, I want you to do the full selection. That's what this is. And I'm creating this courses generic variable that's going to understand that when I create this generic, it means that it's automatically going to be of type course. Now that's one way of writing it. The other way of writing a non-generic is doing what I was doing earlier, which is instead of var courses, we say courses is equal to new course, a new course, right? And then from there, we want to say courses equals to from the way we just wrote it. So it would be another line, like this. So courses, right, is equal to new course. That's the way we would write it. And then from here, you would say then courses is equal to from course in courses, and then select course. And again, the reason for this is because we're using this. This is the syntax that we'd use in the entity framework, right? As an example. And if you notice what it's saying cannot implicitly convert type system link query table, and we'd have to cast this thing, right, as a type of course, right? That's why we use. I was going to back it up. That's why we use the generic, because we don't have to implicitly type everything as a course. Let's go back there and undo everything. But the most common way you're going to see it online is this, right? This is the way. If you're going to look at examples of entity framework, you're going to see it using this generic var, which actually is a throwback. If you remember, if you look at JavaScript, It's identical. Var means variable declaration. I'm declaring a variable of a type any, right? So I don't have to cast my from and in and select all those that whole statement. I don't have to cast it as a type of course or a type of query, right? All right, so that's the first thing I do. And then the next piece, once I've done that, is I want to start accessing my grid view, right? We're kind of running out of time here. But this is what we want to do. We want to say something like this. So we want to bind the results to the grid view that we just created, right? And what's our grid view called anyway? Well, we start typing, and if I start typing grid view, which is what I did, grid view courses 1, which is what I'm binding, right? Dot data source. So I'm kind of deciding on the data source here is equal to courses dot toList, right? Which is basically taking my courses, the table that I'm getting from the course table, and I'm converting it to a list. That's what this is happening, right? And the next one is courses 1, right? Data bind. So once I've done those two pieces, the data bind, what it does, it actually creates a connection, right, to the table. And then of course, this is not what I want. This reason why it's acting up is because just it doesn't understand the spelling. So I can just add this, I say ignore all. Okay, cool. If I've done everything correctly, this is good. This is my get courses method. Well, I need to access it here. When my page loads, right, I want my get courses method to fire. So I can, access it from here. One of the, if you're loading the page for the first time, so if the page is loading for the first time, then, right, get the students, right? So that's what I want to do. If I can check for that if the page has already been loaded. I don't want to access the database again, right? So I say if not is postback, right? So if the page hasn't loaded before, right? Then what I want to do is I want to get courses. I want to kind of call the get courses method. That's what I'm doing here. All right, that's the standard way of doing things. Okay, so that's good. Let's see now, after we've done this little code in the code behind file, right? Does it do anything for us on the front end? So I'm going to kind of run this thing. I should have two tables now. One from before, right? And one from now, and our current table should be unstyled. This one's styled because we've added styling. This one's unstyled, and we use the entity framework to access it in the code behind file. And there's a couple things we're not doing when we use the entity framework, right? All of our password and sensitive information isn't on our page, right? It's inside of a config file somewhere, which is good, right? Still 100% not secure. Yes?
Can you show me the code for the CS?
Yeah, I'll go back there in a second. But, however, we are able to grab the table, and now we can use, which I recommend, we can use Bootstrap to style this thing so it looks a little nicer than what it looked like before. Okay, so let's go back. Sorry, let's go back to that thing, the view that you're asking for. I'm going to stop debugging so you can see it more, and I'll just get rid of this. Okay, and that's really what it is right here. I'm going to kind of see if I can scrunch it down just a little bit for you, just because I want to take care of Lewis, my friend. Right? Otherwise, he'll get mad at me. He's a bouncer at a big club these days, and he practices several martial arts. That's right. He does all kinds of MMA, and I'm afraid, right? So I might as well put it up here. Okay. I'm joking. Go ahead. Are you good with this, Lewis? Now, are you good? Can you see everything?
Yeah.
All right. So again, I didn't quite get to where I wanted today because of our little stuff that we did with our survey. Right? I really didn't get to. I wanted to add additional things and give you a lab to do, and all that kind of stuff. So you know what? Thinking about this, I have leeway. I think what I'd like to do next week, instead of doing our exam next week, I want to push it off until after the break, right? If you guys are okay with that. That'll offset a little bit of your exam stuff because you guys have all kinds of exams next week, I'm guessing, right? So let's wait for one more week. Let's do another week of this data stuff, right? get you more comfortable with working with it, finish your assignment number 1, get you into lab 1, lab 2, maybe lab 3, and then do our exam come week 8, right, which would be after the break. Are you guys comfortable with that? Yeah. I think we need to. I think we need to do more database work. I don't feel comfortable with where we're stopping at right now for me to give you something to kind of test you on, right? Because I think we're going to do more database work on the exam. So if everyone's good, I'll see you guys next week. We'll do more of this. There won't be an exam next week, and I'll post up an addendum to that. Okay. Take care.
Good.
You right there?